con el tema Addressing the Stage Crime Scene. La doctora Pettler inició su carrera como psicóloga en 1997. Luego se enfocó en psicología forense y ciencias forenses. Renombrada criminóloga forense, tiene experticia en las siguientes áreas de investigación de las muertes: simulación de suicidios, accidentes, personas desaparecidas, invasión de morada, homicidio sexual, etc. Investigación y análisis de escenas de crimen, reconstrucción de trayectoria de disparos, análisis e interpretación de patrones de manchas de sangre, victimología y sospechología forense, análisis del comportamiento de víctimas y agresores. Creadora de métodos exitosos para la investigación de las muertes. Fundadora de la primera firma privada de investigación de la muerte en el mundo. Propietaria de la única tienda mundial de reconstrucción de la escena del crimen. Autora y productora de libros, series televisivas y podcasts. Damos la más cordial bienvenida a la doctora Laura Pettler.
Gracias. Buenos días. ¿Cómo está? Okay. This is Dr. Castro's presentation was excellent on femicide and domestic violence, and this presentation on staged murder is really the best one to follow Dr. Castro's presentation, because we see domestic violence homicides staged more often than any other type of homicide. So it's very important to recognize that. So this is a broad topic, very similar to domestic violence, and I'm going to set my timer here on my phone so that I try to keep us on schedule here. Okay. Oh, perfect. Thank you. That's even better. I can see that one. Okay, here we go. Oh, interesting. Okay, this is from yesterday. This is not the right link. The email to Anderson. Here, let me see if I can help you. Yeah. It's in the email. I'm sorry, one moment. Technical difficulty. So let's talk a little bit about staged murder while we get this the presentation actually resolved. And that will help us stay on track, and we can just talk about it. So when we're talking about staging, we're talking about the manipulation, the deliberate, purposeful acts of manipulation of a crime. Now, today, we are specifically going to focus on the manipulation and tampering of evidence, specifically of homicide scenes. And to make it easier, we're going to focus directly on domestic violence homicide, because Dr. Castro's presentation was a perfect segue into what we're talking about here. So staging is a function of communication. When an offender stages the scene of a crime, in our case, the scene of a homicide, they're telling you something. They're giving you something for free. So you want to be able to pick up on that and train yourself to recognize the red flags. There is no reason for someone to stage a murder who does not have a relationship with the victim. The purpose of crime scene staging, beyond the obvious, which is, of course, to avoid apprehension, the purpose of crime scene staging is to self-preserve, but it's telling you, I knew the victim. The offender is telling you, I knew the victim and I had a significant relationship with the victim, because if I didn't and I wasn't going to be named the primary suspect, there's no reason for me to stage this murder. So when you see street crime out, okay. When you see street crime out in the, you're gonna need an Apple adapter.
No, you sent it to me.
Send it to you. So when you see crimes out on the street and one stranger kills another stranger, just straight out onto the street, if you grab my backpack, I have an adapter. We could plug in HDMI. You don't see staging because it's stranger on stranger crime. We also don't see staging in serial homicide. We don't see it because the purpose and the interest of the offender is really not to get away with murder per se. It's really to gain interest in power or anger or something else. So when it comes to staging, there you go. Just plug it into one of those HDMI ports there, right here at the end, right there in the back. We're going to get this going for you guys. Sorry about that. One thing I've learned about working in television all these years is that the show must go on, right? So the show's going on and we're doing multitasking. All right. I never get upset about these things. I never get upset because you can't really control it. And when you're an educator, when you're a presenter, when you're on TV, no matter what happens, just keep talking, right? Just keep talking. So here we go. Will that click for me? Thank you. Okay, so that's a kind of like a bird's eye view into the world of staging. And my whole career has been spent on this particular topic. And the reason that is because I came from the district attorney's office, your state prosecutor. And when I was there, I was in charge of North Carolina's crime scene reconstruction and behavioral analysis program. And for that district. And I created the program. I was the director and the founder with the DA. First and only one ever in North Carolina. And I started seeing these trends in these domestic homicides. And I thought to myself, this is really an interesting area of study. So throughout my master's degree and my PhD study, I focused on domestic violence homicide. And within the scope of domestic violence homicide, I ended up in my PhD program, I ended up writing the third dissertation in the world on staging. It's an extremely under-researched topic in our field, and I aimed to try to fill that gap. It's a big gap to fill. I can't do it alone. But since then, there have been many people who have taken the body of my work and my research and run with the ball and said, okay, I'm going to do a presentation or a dissertation on staging. Oh, I'm going to have to stay close to the computer, y'all. Let me make sure this is working. Okay, so at LPA, Laura Pettler and Associates, Death Investigations, we focus on solving staged murder. This is our specialty. We don't do gang murders. We don't do street crime. We don't do organized crime. We don't do mafia. We focus on solving and clearing staged domestic violence homicides. That is our wheelhouse. That's what we do. We do psych autopsies, as Dr. Castro is mentioning. But we have a couple things that I wanted to share with you today that help prosecutors and investigators and forensic psychologists and forensic criminologists like myself get these court cases in the courtroom and solve them. Because I'm going to tell you what, domestic violence homicide is extremely difficult to prosecute. When you have a husband and a wife living in the same house, do you expect to find both the husband and the wife's fingerprints in the house? Yes or no? Yes. What about DNA? What about hair? What about their clothes? What about their belongings? Their digital evidence? Yes. So can you use all of that in court? Not a lot of times, not in domestic violence homicide prosecution, no. It's a moot point because it's expected to be there. Just because you think that someone killed a victim doesn't mean you know. There's a tremendous difference between thinking and knowing. Tremendous difference. So we're going to really go fast through this presentation, but at the same time, I will be available to answer any of your questions. You might have to click it. I might have to click it. Okay, so because we're short on time, in case you are interested in this, I teach this stuff online through our school. This is the LPA International Forensics Institute. So you, even here or in any part of the world, can take these classes online because this is a very short presentation about this topic, if you're particularly interested in this. This is not a sales pitch of any kind whatsoever. I'm trying to give you resources to be able to continue your education in this particular topic. This is a book called Crime Scene Staging Dynamics in Homicide Cases. I wrote this book and published this book 2015, 2016. This is the first book in the world on staged murder, domestic violence homicide, victimology in relation to staged murder, and how to solve them first and clear them in the courtroom second. It's the first log on the fire. It is not the be-all, tell-all of staged murder because there's much more work for us to do. All of us in this field. Much more work. Yeah. You're going to click for me? Thank you, George. George is great. Y'all know George? George is one of my new friends. He is fantastic. If it wasn't for George, I'm not really sure what we would be doing. Thank you, George. Okay, research, critically important when it comes to staged murder. You can think somebody staged the scene. You can think somebody staged a murder, but without research, without going into the courtroom and saying, hey, I've got published research that supports my position. That's what the prosecutors have to do. That's what psychologists and criminologists have to do. They can't just go in there and render an opinion. You have to substantiate your opinion. In the United States, we talk about you can arrest a ham sandwich, but you can't prosecute a ham sandwich all the time. Just because you arrest someone does not mean you can prosecute them all the way through the process. That's what makes prosecuting staged murders and addressing staged scenes extremely difficult, with unique characteristics only seen in this particular area of crime. Okay. Intimicide. This is our word for domestic violence homicide. We call it intimicide, intimate partner homicide. Intimicide. I got tired of writing intimate partner homicide. So here we go. intimicide. The reason we call it intimicide is because not only do we have, oh my gosh, I don't even know how many cases of female victims, we have male victims of domestic violence homicide. We solve cases of domestic violence homicide where men are also the victim. Women kill, y'all. Women kill. I'm from North Carolina, if you can't tell. My southern accent, right? Southern part of the United States. Women kill. Women kill. And when they do it very specifically. So if your experience has only been in domestic violence homicide where women are the victims, yes, of course we see a pattern there. But we also see patterns in women who kill men. What do you think one of the most common murder weapons is when women kill men? What do they like to use? Knives, yes. Poison. Poison. There's very, very different types of intimicide. So you have to be aware that when you're talking about staging, the way a woman stages a murder of her boyfriend or husband is very, very different than the way a man will stage it. So these are just like big concepts that I want to introduce to you today because we're short on time. Now we're down to 30 minutes. I can do it in 30 minutes, don't worry. Okay, crime scene. A crime scene is a place where an illegal act has been committed and where evidence may be recovered related to the offense. Next, George. But a death scene is where someone has died. Not every death scene is a crime scene, right? And not every crime scene is a death scene. Can you have a burglary crime scene? Yeah. Can you have a carjacking crime scene? Yeah. Can you have a murder crime scene? Yeah. They come in different kinds. But death scenes always are related to when a person is dead. The first thing to understand, go ahead, George. So I want to show you 4 things to be aware of to study, okay? Now, you see that there's little plus signs, plus, equals, all right? Dr. Lucio and I were talking about this yesterday at lunch. We were talking about offender profiling and how we get there, why we use offender profiling, why we don't, when you want to use it and when you don't, and the great things about it and the limitations, because there's always both sides of the coin. Victimology, like we talked about yesterday, that will help you solve and address the staged crime scene. You have to have your victimology. Remember when I was telling you about that can of Coke? Right? Do I like Coke? Yes. Do I like Pepsi? No. So that is what's important. That's important to know what your victim likes and what your victim doesn't like. Is your victim very neat and orderly in his or her house, or are they like really messy and disorganized? What if you go in the house and it's super messy of an organized person? That's a huge red flag. So these are the reasons we study victimology. Plus, we study the dynamics of a scene to understand and address the staged scene. We understand that the ebb and flow, how it moves back and forth, because remember, if this is a firearm or this is a knife, you've got the victim on one side and the offender on the other, and they're connected by the weapon. They're connected in the center by the weapon. And so then the offender pushes against the victim, and then the victim pushes back against the offender. And it's this big tug of war, this tennis match going back and forth until somebody wins. They are in what I call divergent dualism. Divergent dualism, meaning that the victim is trying to survive and the killer is trying to kill. They have 2 opposite goals. That's your dynamics, the variation in force and intensity in the scene. Homicidal pattern. We were talking a lot about this yesterday. Homicidal pattern relates to the kind of homicide. Femicide, Dr. Castro is explaining all the different characteristics of femicide. That's a particular homicidal pattern. then when you culminate all these together, when you add victimology to the dynamics, to the homicidal pattern, you get the offender profile. That's how that works. So you take your death scene, you take your victimology, you take all your characteristics of the scene and of your situation, and you add them together, and then you can profile the killer. Does that make sense? That doesn't sound too hard, does it? No. Okay. Just to be clear on homicidal pattern, here are just some examples of homicidal pattern. You can have domestic violence murder, or what we call intimicide. You can have gang-related, a homicidal pattern of gang-related murder. Organized crime looks totally different from domestic violence. Totally different. I worked a lot of Italian mafia cases when I was very young. I learned a lot. It's very different from serial murder. The number one reason for serial murder is profit. The number one reason for serial homicide is profit. People think it's sex, but it's not. It's actually profit. Interesting. I always thought that was interesting. Sexual murder, very different pattern. So as CSIs, as forensic pathologists, as medical examiners, as prosecutors, as criminologists, as psychologists, it's important for all of us to recognize, you know what? There's lots of different homicidal patterns out there. And when you walk up on a scene, once you learn these, you're going to walk up there and go, oh, look, earmark 1, earmark 2, earmark 3, 4, 5, and 6. That is a boom. And they can tell you, you'll be able to identify what kind of murder you're looking at right off the bat. That makes it easy. Okay, George. Motives for murder. Whoa, right? Motives for murder. What are some motives for murder? Anger? Yes or no? Sex? Money? Power? Revenge? All of it, right? All of it. We could go on and on and on and on. And all of this is reflected in your scene. Everything that you see, everything that the offender is feeling will be reflected back at you just like a mirror, which sounds crazy. And when I was very young and I had a forensic psychologist that was teaching me this, he said that the crime scene is a reflection of the personality offender. I was like, what? But it's true. It is true. Murder is most often simple. Murder is conflict resolution. I want you to keep that in mind, because in 100% of all staged homicides that everyone who studies staged homicides has ever researched, in 100% preceding conflict before the victim's death is found in 100% of the cases. Murder is conflict resolution. Now, are there other types of conflict resolution? Can you sit down and have a conversation and say, I'm sorry? Yeah. And then there's murder, right? Some people choose to kill. Some people choose to kill. Some people choose to sit down and say, we have a problem, let's work this out. So that's one type of conflict resolution, and murder for an offender is another. As Dr. Castro is explaining, when a domestic abuser loses control and has a fear of abandonment of the victim, many times they kill. Not always, but many times. Okay. The first question is always easy to answer. When you are talking about why is the victim's body in this position? Why is the victim face down? Why is the victim face up? There are reasons for all of this, okay? In domestic violence homicide, it is very common to find the victims face down. And if these are the doors to the room where you find the body, the eyes will be faced away from the points of entry and exit. The reason is because offenders that kill that way, they like to put the victim's face down and they like to turn them away from the doors, because when they go out that door, they turn around and they have control of who's looking at who last. And we have seen it over and over and over and over again in staged homicide. Benefit. It's very important to recognize that when someone stages a scene or stages the murder of an offender, that they are trying to benefit from the victim's death. The murder doesn't make any difference. The murder doesn't count. The murder doesn't matter if the offender doesn't get away with it. They're killing so they can benefit somehow from the victim's death. But if they get caught, well, then what was the point of doing it? So you have to identify the benefits. How does this particular person, the husband, the boyfriend, the wife, the girlfriend, how does that person benefit from the victim's death? What about life insurance? Could that be a benefit? Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. What if the killer was, what if the husband or the wife is having an affair and wants to be with the other person they're having an affair with, but they don't want to pay for the divorce? Is that a motive for murder? Oh, yeah. Every day. Every day. Okay. So let's talk about staging. As you know, the book that I wrote 5-6 years ago was called Crime Scene Staging Dynamics in Homicide Cases. Since then, in all of our published research since then, we have moved away from talking about crime scene staging only. And we are now advocating at LPA worldwide for people to leave behind just the phrase crime scene staging and instead focus on staging. The reason why is we've been able to expand our body of knowledge to not only understand how they stage this scene that will help all of you in your various fields of practice, but we now have information that and metrics that will help you understand the other ways that they stage murder as well. So we have moved up in the world. We've gotten better. We're not there all the way yet, but we're getting better. Staging, and that's okay, George. Just to be clear, staging is the purposeful, deliberate manipulation of a crime, and in this case, a homicide. Because of course you can have all kinds of crimes that are staged. But in our situation, it's particular to homicide. And staging behaviors are the purposeful, deliberate, deceptive acts of communication that meet the needs of the subject or the offender, designed to misdirect a death investigation. That's our formal definition that we publish. And we are known for our work in staged cases. Okay, George, thank you. Okay, intimicide. Intimicide focuses on the victim-offender relationship. And when you focus on the victim-offender relationship, it will explain to you how your scene is staged. Very important. You have to spend a lot of time doing victimology and then, of course, doing the suspectology. That's the other half of victimology. First, you study the victim, then you study the subject or the suspect or the defendant. And then you find out how they interrelate and why that weapon is in the middle and how they ebb and flow in that scene. Staged murders are staged very often as suicides. You'll see lots and lots of cases in your career in domestic violence homicide that look like suicides. Accidents. Domestic violence homicides that are staged are also staged like accidents, pushing someone down the stairs. We had a couple cases a few years ago with tetrahydrozoline. Tetrahydrozoline is the chemical in eye drops, in Visine. You know what Visine is? Okay, when you put Visine in the eyes, okay. You ingest Visine down your throat, in your stomach, it stops your heart. That's bad. That's bad. So sometimes it's not detectable in particular toxicology panels. So you have to be aware that sometimes if a person has ingested that and then fallen down the stairs, they've actually been poisoned. But it looks like they died because they fell down the stairs. Very famous case in North Carolina versus Michael Peterson. It would be a good one to look up. It's a one about a beating death of a woman at the bottom of the staircase, and her husband, Michael Peterson, is the defendant. He says an owl, a bird, an owl, hoo, 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 yeah? Hoo, 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 hoo. Okay, bird came into the house and attacked his wife in the head. Y'all look at the pictures and let me know what you think. Owl or beating death? Sexual homicides. In sexual homicides, when you go to a scene that is staged as a sexual homicide, a lot of times they abduct the victim. You'll find the victim outside of the marital residence. You'll find the victim somewhere in a field, in a trunk of a car, in an alley, and the clothes will be on the victim. But sometimes the shirt is pulled up. Sometimes the pants are pulled down, unbuttoned or unzipped, but not off the victim. In staged murder, does the killer know what a sexual homicide looks like most often? No, because they've never committed a sexual homicide. So what they stage is what they think a sexual homicide looks like. When you find sexual homicide victims, are they often naked? Yes, not in staged sexual homicide. Our research shows that they're most often not unclothed completely, okay? Home invasion murder. Sometimes killers that stage homicides will stage this scene to look like somebody broke into the house, attacked and killed the victim because the victim came home and said, "Oh, wow, you're in my house," or something like that. That's not true. That's not what happened. But that's what they're trying to get away with. Here's a little tip to remember. Normally, killers will kill the most violent, the greatest threat to them. If they are doing a home invasion and they are in your house and they're trying to steal things, and a husband and wife come home, who are they most likely to kill first out of the husband or the wife? The husband or the wife? The husband, because they're going to think the husband poses the biggest threat to them, right? So when the husband calls you on 911, do y'all have 911? Is it 911 or is it another number? No, okay. So they call 911 here in Panama. All right. And the husband says, "Oh my gosh, we came home and this offender was in the house and they killed my wife, but he's still standing." That is a clue. That's what we call a clue. Don't believe that guy. Don't believe him. It's very unlikely that's the truth. Self-defense. Domestic violence homicide all day long. You will find men telling you that they were defending themselves against women. Now, I have seen a lot of women kill in my day. A lot. With knives, as we've mentioned, yes. So is it possible? Yes. But you have to look at other elements of the situation to be able to determine if that he's telling the truth. Sometimes women will use this argument as well. Many, many times in American courtrooms, we see this argument that women are defending themselves against men. It's very likely. It's a much more believable reason for murder than a man defending himself against a woman. So keep that in mind when you're talking about staged murder. Missing person. Here's the thing about domestic violence homicide. When an offender in domestic violence homicide kills, and we're going to use women as the example, kills his wife or girlfriend, intimate partner, A lot of times they're going to call 911 and tell you that she's missing. But a lot of times they call you and tell you that, when they call you, let me back up. Sometimes they call you and tell you on 911 that the victim is missing. But sometimes they call someone in the victim's family and say, hey, have you seen Mary? I don't know where Mary is. They know exactly where Mary is. Mary is dead. But they're trying to use the mother, the father, the friend of the victim to go, oh, I don't know where Mary is. I haven't talked to her. Then that person calls 911 for them. They also will never report that somebody is missing. Then when you as the police go to them and say, hey, you know, Mary's mom called us and said she hadn't been able to get a hold of Mary. Do you know where Mary is? Let me tell you where Mary is. Mary has run off with another man. Mary is gone. She's run off with another man, and I don't know where she is. And in fact, I don't care if she comes back. I have been told that so many times in my career by killers who have killed their wives and said that they've run off. You know where those women are? Out in the field somewhere, sunk in the river. That's where we've recovered them. In the trunks of cars, all kinds of different situations. But they had not run off with another man. So keep that in mind. When you hear those kinds of things, that is what we call at LPA linguistic staging. They're telling you, orally telling you, they're staging and saying, hey, she ran off with another man. They're trying to tell you that something else happened. Let's see here. Okay, go ahead, George. Go ahead, keep going from there. Go ahead, let's go through these. All right, this is a good one to talk about. Let's go back to precautionary acts. Go back 1 second. Okay, so let's differentiate between a couple things. When we're talking about staging, we're talking about the deliberate manipulation of the physical scene, of the evidence in the scene. We're talking about linguistic evidence. Instead of saying, I killed Mary and I sunk her in the river, they're going to say, Mary ran off with another man. That's linguistic staging. Okay? You as the investigator don't really know if Mary ran off with another man. Why don't you know the answer to that question yet? What do you have to conduct in order to figure that out? What is it? Victimology. Yes, that's the answer. So when he tells you Mary ran off with another man and you've conducted victimology, you say, yeah, I don't buy that. Well, I'm going to go ahead and try again. Where's Mary? You got 5 minutes to decide, or I'm going to take you to jail. You now have 4 minutes and 30 seconds. That's how we roll. They start thinking then. Or they tell you to get off their porch and don't come back till you have a warrant. That's the other option. Precautionary acts: wearing gloves, wearing a mask, wearing Tyvek, wearing booties. Those are precautionary acts that they take to try to guard their identity. That is not manipulating the scene. Okay, next, George. Death scene alteration. Staging manipulates the scene, manipulates the linguistic evidence. Precautionary acts, they wear gloves, they wear masks, they wear goggles, they wear Tyvek to try to keep their identity out of the scene. But death scene alteration is totally different. Have you ever heard of autoerotica? Yeah? Okay. In autoerotica scenes, when a person accidentally dies, because their purpose is not to die, their purpose is sexual gratification. But what if a mom or a dad comes home and finds their son or their daughter dead in an autoerotic position. Is that embarrassing for the victim? Yes. Is it embarrassing to the family maybe? Yes. So when they alter that death scene and cover the body with a blanket, cover the body with a towel, cut the victim down because they're hanging in the room or whatever the situation is, they're not trying to stage the scene. They're not trying to get away with murder. They're not trying to confuse you or misdirect your investigation. They are trying to preserve the dignity of the victim and the family. They do that out of respect for the victim. It's important to remember, death scene alteration protects the victim. Death scene staging protects the offender. Two totally different things. Alteration in the death scene is not the same as staging. Okay? Again, this is the murder room method that I showed you yesterday. And down here in the bottom, we're going to focus on two things for the last 5 minutes and 38 seconds, like super fast. The first thing down here is called Pettler Staging Trilogy. And if you guys want to take pictures of these when they come up on the screen, you can do that. And the second one is over here called Pettler Staging Taxonomy. These two pieces, these two tools will help you in the field. Okay? The first thing you need to know is never assume the integrity of anything any witness tells you. Never assume the integrity of the 911 caller. Never assume the integrity of what the 911 caller says. Never assume the integrity of the way the body is positioned. Never assume the integrity of the way the weapon is in the scene. The bloodstain evidence, the fiber evidence, the DNA evidence, or anything. We never assume the integrity of anything when you deal with staged murders. The first rule of dealing with staged murders is never believe anybody. Pretty easy, right? Okay. Pettler Staging Trilogy. In 100% of cases, staged murder cases, you will find preceding conflict. When it comes to domestic violence homicide, of which I am an expert in that particular type of homicidal pattern, you will find the conflict that preceded the death of the victim within 24, 48, 72, 7 days, or 30 days prior to the victim's death. Go looking. Go digging and conduct what? Victimology. Next. When you get to the scene, you drive up to the scene, you're a CSI, you're a prosecutor, you're a death investigator from the ME's office. You drive up there, you get out of the car. I want you to think about three things and ask three questions. This will help prevent a cold case. This will help you prevent a case that's staged going unsolved. Number one, who's in conflict with this victim? Anybody know? If nobody knows, find out. Find out before you do anything else. Number two, who discovered the victim? Number three, who called 911 and what did they say? If you find out, well, who's in conflict with Mary? Well, her husband, Pete. Well, who discovered Mary dead? Pete. Well, who called 911? Pete. And what did Pete say? Pete said Mary killed herself. There you go. Raise the red flag, the caution flag that says, wait a second, I should proceed here with caution because this could be a staged murder. We've got conflict, we've got discovery, and we've got 911 call, all by the same guy. All it does, Pettler Staging Trilogy, all it does is triage for you. Okay, George, next. Keep going. Stop right here. We got 2 minutes, 30 seconds. You think I can do it? Oh, yeah. Okay. Pettler Staging Taxonomy. One Wednesday morning, back in February of 2021, I shot like straight up out of bed. It was like, I have an idea. And you guys have known me for 2 days now. You know I get really excited about all these things, right? So this is what was in my mind. So I get up and I go to my desk and I start putting it down. And I want you to take pictures of this. Let me get out of the way in case you want to take a picture of it. This is Staging Taxonomy. This is the very first one in the world. And this will help you What this is this is telling you, here are the 3 types of behaviors you'll see out of killers who stage murders. The first kind of behavior you're going to see is linguistic staging. They are going to do things on the oral side of linguistic staging, like call 911 and give you all kinds of wild stories about the victim. They're going to give you wild statements when you go to interview them. Things that don't make sense. They're going to leave voicemails for the dead victim. Has that ever happened to anybody? Has anybody had a killer ever leave a voicemail for a dead victim after they killed the victim? Oh, yeah. That's something that they do. They write notes. They send texts to the victim. They've killed the victim. They're trying to stage like they don't know the victim is dead. They get on social media and say, has anyone seen my wife? Or have anyone seen my husband? On the visual side, this is in your scene. They subtract, they add, and destroy evidence. They clean up evidence with bleach. They hide the murder weapon. They plan the murder. They go to the store and they buy garbage bags and carpet freshener and all kinds of things, duct tape, clear tape, all kinds of things to clean things with. They rearrange things in the scene, and then sometimes they go to a bridge and they throw the weapon off of the bridge. Sometimes they light the scenes on fire. They break things. And then in the nonverbal category, it's their way that they use their body language. Pay attention to the way their eyes look, the way their face looks. What if someone's telling you, yes? Yes, absolutely yes. Does that make sense? Did that make sense? No, but they do it all the time. If they go, no, they're telling you yes with their body and they can't control themselves. So pay attention to the way that they're staging. They're linguistically telling you no, but their body is telling you yes. These are 3 ways that you can address your staged crime scene, your staged death scene, and avoid cold cases while helping your prosecutors and your medical examiners get the information that they need to present a staged homicide in court. Thank you very much for having me today. I'm 10 seconds over, so I will stop talking. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them outside of the room. Thank you.